now for the panelists to join us in this session. But as you know, like the session is, I think it's going to be challenging for us now to discuss after the cities. They said that they are ready, and as a technology one, we have to deliver. So let's see. Usually, you know, like we always play a ping pong, who should provide which conditions and who is enabler in these type of activities. But okay, let's see. Okay, so thank you for joining, and I also have to thank the audience for having you can hear me better, yeah. Thank you for staying also with us and at this panel session. And also I want to thank the organizers for inviting us to join and to really share the other, let's say, the latest visions or on the latest technologies that are developing on the market, how we reflect on them, how we perceive them in terms of sustainability, and also how we can help with new technologies to reach this goal that we are all going towards that one. So here in the panel today, we have 4 very nice representatives from the industry side, and I would like to introduce you first Eman, and then Jordi, then Benoît and Dirk, who will just briefly start the session with short introduction from your side and your background in the work, and then we will go into the discussion at the panel, and we will leave some floor also to you to discuss about the key points of this debate. So Eman, please, you can introduce yourself.
So I'm responsible for political affairs government relations within BOSH in the UK, but I studied electrical engineering, and I was involved in the automotive development and R&D until now. I'm always involved also in the urban mobility. I'm looking forward to be controversial in this round, hopefully, with the other colleagues to the former round.
Turn on, please.
Yeah, but I think I'm loud enough. Loud enough? Okay. Don't I?
Hello. Well, first, thanks for inviting me. My name is Jordi Casas. I'm, well, long time ago I started to work on transport models, so we developed a transport simulator called AIMSUN Next, and, well, today we participate in Harmony as providing the support on the operational level. So glad to be here and having a nice discussion with my colleagues.
Thank you very much, and very happy to be here with great people as well. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Benoît. I started my career as aerospace engineer, became a commercial pilot, and spent the 15 first years of my life on, roles with different kind of responsibilities, and realized 5 years ago that I wanted to have a positive impact on the world, and that's what I tried to do modestly. I've been involved with EIT as an external expert, but I'm obviously not speaking on behalf of EIT today.
Well, also thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, as you mentioned. So my name is Dirk Schindler, working for Airbus Defence and Space. I am working as a product manager for air dominance solutions, so air coordination topic. My background is I studied business informatics, and before that I was flying Navy helicopters for 15 years, so I know both sides, the actual flying and the controlling.
Okay, very well. Thank you all for the brief introductions, and I would like maybe to start this discussion on panel with the definition of our topic today. Yeah, so we are looking up how we are transitioning to this sustainable mobility and using those new technologies and the services. And Benoît was inspiring very well, and today we speak a whole day about the different tools and solutions, how we can reach this sustainability. But maybe we can start first reflection what sustainable mobility is. Yeah. So if we look up just as a definition, if we go to Wikipedia or if you look up in any the dictionary, yeah, information, sustainability is something where ability to maintain the performance at a certain level, yeah, an agreed level. And as a sustainable mobility, we are perceiving this agreed level something that is socially acceptable, and also something that is from in a green way, economic way, environmental way, sustainable as well. So, but we are still not having or lacking full definition of this term. So do you agree with this terminology, or would you like to add something on that one? Are we missing something? Maybe I can start.
Please, I'll take the question. I think the perspective is very interesting to keep providing the same service, but hopefully I would add, lowering the impact on the planet. And I think we talk about energy consumption, and we'll talk eventually about how, energy efficient the drones are compared to other alternatives. But, even if we solve the climate problem, we're still facing the sixth mass extinction of species on this planet. So there is more to sustainability than just maintaining the service. It's how do we restore the planetary boundaries that maybe we've overshot. And I think as decision makers, as responsible people, we need to face those. And I think, or thinking of sustainability should definitely embrace that aspect. Dinosaurs disappeared. We all learned that at school. Yeah. Well, the rate of extinction is much higher today than it was back then. What do we do about it? And how much time do we have to do something about it? So yeah. I would include that aspect as well.
Okay, very well. And Eman?
So the definition, what you mentioned, is correct partially, but it's not complete.
Yeah.
When we talk about sustainable mobility, it has 3 dimensions. The first dimension is obviously the environment of the sustainability in general, that is its cities. Yeah. And then the second elements of it, of course, the technologies related to the sustainable model. And that means we're talking about vehicles, we're talking about bikes, we're talking about active walking and all of this. And this is the sustainability within these models which make things more complicated. And we can elaborate afterwards on it, but definitely we are not there yet. So sustainability in that side of things. The third model has something to do with the sustainability of our behavior to adapt to different model shifts what we are offering actually within the sustainability models. So it's a very complicated, and I think what you mentioned is correct, but nevertheless, it doesn't include the complexity behind the whole calculations around it.
Absolutely, and we see also the extension to societal goals, right? So involving more and taking on inclusiveness of the services, reaching out to the user targets and thinking about them. And I think this is very the user need, right? It's also a little bit related to the topic that we discussed today, because it's about the new 2 fleets, let's say, on our market, and having on one hand connected autonomous mobility and also the urban air mobility that is using completely innovative fleet that we are even not used to them and their services, etc. And we could learn already from the pilots in the previous debate of how citizens are responding to this service, how they feel safe, is there enough noise or not from the services specific, so how we feel comfortable with acceptance of these new services. However, I wanted to address with you how, if you can come up with your personal or example, I know that Airbus was and Dirk was involved in one of those pilots here, as you can share with us some lessons learned from those use cases and already the tests that you have run that can help us or speed up this type of transition, yeah, for the deployment. Because what we learned so far, and also every time when we have new technology, the deployment starts, yeah, but then there is always like at the pilot level. And now cities are saying like, oh, we are ready, but let's do something more about that one. So what are the kind of lessons that you have experienced that can help us improve these deployments towards these sustainable solutions?
Well, I think the biggest lesson learned is that not everything which is technically feasible can be done, especially in the discussion which we just heard about sustainability. We can produce a lot of technology and we can achieve a lot of great things, bring value to the people. But on the other hand, it has to be balanced. All the value for people, I think it needs a balance. What we do, as you said before, what we do against against our nature, our planet. So there is no. It was also mentioned before this morning. There is no evolvement or achievement without an impact to the planet, and the decision makers need to be aware with any decision what are the consequences. And I think there's also lessons learned from our work, engagement and harmony. We are able to provide this information. We are able to show the impact and we are able to show what is feasible, but what also are the consequences and what is the danger of, as you see, sometimes we have our the outcome of the rubbish of our productions in the oceans and our nature. So we don't want to have that. We want to be more sustainable, and technology today can do a lot in this direction.
Okay, and Benoît, yesterday also you exchanged also urban air mobility, one interesting use case that we discussed about, it was regarding the safety and operations and how different conditions. So can you reflect on that one as well?
If I recall the discussion that we
yes.
had, no, I think from our perspective, and I've been involved for 20 years in aerospace, just building back on what we were saying a minute ago, you know, we have this tool, it is less energy efficient than a bike by 1 or 2 orders of magnitude. We're talking 10 to 100 per kilo. The key question becomes then, what do we use it for to really benefit something? Precisely what you were saying. You know, replace a 5-ton helicopter by a 10-kilo drone for the same use to monitor wildfire. Fantastic, you've saved. If you're just adding on top, obviously the equation becomes very different. Touching on the topics that was shared previously as well, and how the regulations are evolving, the rules today, and I think this is the use case you were talking about, the rules today are that manned traffic, so traditional traffic, has precedence over unmanned traffic. You know, if I fly a drone, I have to go away so that Joe and his Cessna or the, you know, the Vueling flight that's arriving can land. The interesting aspect that was added to the complexity was when we were running simulation with manned and unmanned traffic. There were some use cases, we've been told this morning that some of the early use cases would likely to be emergency medical services, transporting something to solve a sanitary problem somewhere, blood in a bag, or transport a patient. In the current regulation, if this is being done by drone, that will have, by definition, a lower priority over the tourist flight in a Cessna. You know. And it becomes the question again, what is the value we bring to the society, to the stakeholders? And if you ground the defibrillator that's going to save the grandma in a rural area because there is some touristic flights in a Cessna, well, obviously that brings the value. However, we go to the mountains of the weekend, fly our drones, we can't tell the 747, hey, they're having fun, land the 747. So that will be part of the regulations evolving so that we make sure we bring this service to the society and we contribute to making the world better with those new technologies that are now available or being made available by the different players.
Yeah, and this is actually just extending the number of the stakeholders that should really sit together and agree and discuss together about the new targets or the regulations, etc. And I'm quite convinced, Eman, you have a chance to work with a lot of stakeholders, right? And to have a chance to speak with many. So how do you feel like today in the market? Is this stakeholder changing? Is it getting really better? Are we really getting in that direction to reach that kind of common agreement on sustainable mobility, or it's still like a market-isolated discussion? And
okay, I have to choose my words, but okay.
Yeah.
So I believe that the technology is there. The technology is not the problem. We're ready. But I have to be honest that in lots of cases where I was involved, where we're talking about integrated services, because this is what actually you're hinting to, there has to be an integrated service to make sense for the use cases to flourish. And until then, I found, unfortunately, that the authorities are fragmented and that they have different devolution agenda. I'm talking specifically about the UK. I'm sure Europe probably is a little bit different, not maybe far different, but there is no common strategy sometimes within the authorities about their cities, how actually they want to conduct these services. So you dealing, first of all, with the local politics, but then you're dealing with the national politics about actually, for example, allowing a certain certificates for drones to, for example, fly in a certain areas. We know near Heathrow, for example, there was some problems 3 years ago, and then they banned actually then drones from flying in a certain areas. And then you're dealing into the European Commission laws, and then we're dealing on the global laws. So, and all of these laws, and I can tell you, there is no harmonization or standardizations of that, and therefore for the, for the service provider, technology providers, all of us, you kind of invested and also committed to your investments in these areas, but you cannot see the commitments coming from the other side, because we can do that much. We could do the integrated services, we could support wonderful projects like Harmony, but where we can go from there. And I think this is probably reiterated even in the panel before, that this is still a problem, like you said, for example, saving life with the drones in very rural areas. In fact, actually, earthquake in Turkey, there are lots of roads, they cannot at the moment get into it, but you can see that still the policymakers are a little bit slow in reacting in an agile way. And what we need here is really dynamic agility in the way how we adapt, for example, the dynamic integrated services to allow the technology providers or the service providers to actually do their job. This is at least my opinion and experience until now.
Yeah, very well. And maybe, I'm not sure like, if you would like Jordi as well to...
No, I think that the key word, in especially with evaluate this technology, is uncertainty. So the technology is there. The data today is there, but we don't know what we'll have in 5 years. For example, assessing the impact of connected and autonomous vehicles always is a trade-off between safety and efficiency. Mm-hmm. It's just two KPIs that, well, and the two criteria are against. It means if you want to increase the safety, probably the efficiency is going to decrease. And that's the main problem that we face, for example, as a transport modeler, that, well, we need to deal with this uncertainty. And when you design an experiment, there is just a small parameter that says, what is the penetration rate? And, well, we don't know in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So the key aspect on evaluate what could be the KPIs related to this sustainability is manage this uncertainty at different levels, social, technological, from a point of view of the legislation.
Yeah, very well. And I see Dirk also is raising a hand already. We are getting into the...
I'm fully with you, but from Airbus perspective, there will not be an impact on safety. So this is not about to discuss. We can have different levels of efficiency, but only above 100% of safety, if we can agree.
No, but at least in road traffic, the safety is more related because we are going to deal with mixed scenarios. And that's the issue, I think. Means from the technological point of view. I remember in a conference that the technical director of Uber mentioned, we are trying to solve the hardest problem now. That is having this autonomous vehicle completely independent, alone. But we are ready in the future to get information from the surroundings, cooperative, and then the problem will become easy to solve. And that's the spirit, I think.
Yeah. And Benoît, you're...
I think reflecting, and I think the debate around safety does change a little bit if you're on the ground or flying. I mean, it's a lot easier to stop on the side of the road than it is to, to stop. So I fully understand perspective. I mean, but I would strongly encourage, I think, and that's the message that I try to spread when I work, to, do try to bring this clarity, but also not be afraid of what I call back of the envelope kind of calculations. I mean, we made a simple drones, not to pitch against the Airbus one, but the biggest human-carrying drone currently would be the Lilium Jet, if it ever flew at capacity. That's 6 persons plus a pilot. If you flew one of those every 30 seconds between the airport and the city center, that's still less than the capacity of one train that goes every 10 minutes from the airport to the city center. So what are the use cases, and who do you use it for? From the time you do that, obviously, you're going to have a premium service. I mean, if you cannot transport only 100 people per hour, it is a premium service. Who do you do it for, and who benefits from the noise, the visual pollution, etc.? Who are your stakeholders? How do you benefit that? And sometimes just doing simple back of the envelope. It doesn't matter if you're talking about 100, 150, or etc. Well, the capacity of a train is in the thousands. So, you have an order of magnitude, and I think that helps sometimes just make quick decisions, but it's still pretty ground-based. But taking into account all the differences that you make, a small ground vehicle will have a different equation than an air one. I hear that.
I see Dirk as well.
That brings me back to what we had discussed earlier. I think we need to have more engagement. I would wish more engagement by the cities and the city councils. From what I saw from aviation, and we know what's going on with all the rule makers, EASA, Eurocontrol. They are all working on the processes for the U-space or the UTM on the global level, and from my perspective, I don't see so much involvement like in Harmony, where we had the cooperation between the cities and the aviation part, but in all the other bodies, I think it's missing. So this could be a way. And I know there is this UIC2. Yes. It's a UAM Connect, no, what is the name? Civitas with air mobility, where the cities can apply, and that would probably be a good way to have the voices and the view of the cities in the environment with the third dimension.
Yeah, very well. So what we want from our debate now is going in the direction of cities has to be more loud and to speak more for the user needs, so that we can kind of come as well with the technology match. But I see recognize already we are reaching out now the moment where we are tackling the challenges of identifying the right use cases, viable use cases, let's call them like that, and to come up with this type of a responsible approach to their operation and deployment. And what I see here as well with all this multi-stakeholder chain that we have, the business model use cases will also pull the new business models. And I have a feeling like today we get used to the services and the business model that we know as they are, but there is a big change on the market as well. Like, can we come up with new business models for specific use cases and how this can help us? So maybe, Eman, maybe you can reflect a bit on that one in terms of the business and how to make those services more viable, let's say, in identifying them.
Absolutely. I mean, I have sympathy with the cities, by the way, and don't get me wrong. So I think that there is a lack of funds. I just wanted to clear that actually you're suffering from, and also lack of resources as well, which is actually also impact on why we feel as a business sometimes that there's a slowness of the decision making. Now, for the new business areas, let's see, for example, how COVID unleashed actually new service models, where people, from the online perspective, for example, the digitalization increased with COVID more than it was before 17%. And now we're talking about 45%. That has actually allowed new business models. And fintech, for example, you almost in every taxi now you pay online. That wasn't the case for COVID. Yeah. So you kind of have the possibility through a certain crisis that you impose new business models, and actually that the uptake of that is immense, fast. Or you impose these services through actually legislations and the net zero carbon agenda. So when we talk about the net zero carbon agenda, you will see that lots of cities now, they are shifting into, the modal shift of dynamic integrated services, with actually having the last mile delivery, or actually that you go with the train and then afterwards you can take a bike, etc. So we can see it definitely in cities, but probably not on the way what we wish to have in a more expanded, scalable way. The third element, which I see as well as happening from the service perspective and from the payment, is the drones was one of the topics actually, that some of the deliverables can be done through the drones. Why is that? If you come back to the online deliveries, we found out that actually the majority of the packages get delivered from Amazon in the early morning from 7 o'clock to until 10 a.m. That actually managed that the traffic is chock-blocked. So the vehicles or traffic what you're having at the moment on the streets are because of the package delivery. And then you have the same peak in the evening. So where we see new business models is actually, if you allow drones deliveries to happen, for example, in this period, to then actually lower the peak because of the work traffic from, for example, 7 to 10 a.m., And that's why you will then have an integrated services in a way that you will allow, for example, deliverables through delocalized logistic outside of the city to inside of the city in different timing, or you do it in the evening, for example, deliverables of the logistic packages in the evening to deliver it for example, the city or wherever who actually is asking for that online. I can go on and on, but what I'm trying to say is that it will be a mix of integrated services, which actually then the use case depends on the data which we're collecting and what use model is beneficial in which city. What I'm saying now is probably could be applicable for the UK, but couldn't be applicable, for example, for Spain because of the certain reasons of the traffic data what you guys are collecting. And that's why you see the complexity. But what I'm trying to say is the best thing is that to, create new business models is to understand through the data actually about the patterns of the mobility, and therefore you can then identify what's the best services moving forward. Very complicated academic answer, I know.
No, very well. I like being ambitious, in this sense, in terms of the business use cases and how to test them. And what I see recognized today, that the traffic simulation models, or all the models that has been developed in the Harmony project, right? Before they were used more as kind of evaluation tool to check the network performance level, how we are doing about the travel times, how we are doing. But now I see and recognize way more opportunities also to deploy different business use cases, and really because now we can integrate inside and we can test the sensitivity of the people choices to different pricing strategies. We can also different services, etc. So the scalability of the service can be easily evaluated, etc. So, Jordi, maybe you can share with us some examples on of using the simulation tools.
Reflection is the evolution of the traffic, the application of transport models on assessing any policy. In the past, I remember that a long time ago, that even the planning office and the operational office, there is no contact. But today has to be everything integrated, planning and operation, and also combining passengers and goods. So this holistic view is necessary, in our case, to like Harmony, to provide tools in order to assess different components, but also the regulation and the organization should think in this holistic view, because that's for me, and really it's in the past was like this, and now I hope, cross the fingers, that we'll be in this direction to have this holistic view of the mobility, not just public transport or private cars or whatever.
So working all together. So maybe, Benoît, maybe would you like also to add some of the
I'm happy to
aspects?
compliment, but I very much like the answers we've already heard. I think you're absolutely right. There is a kind of knowledge gap, maybe, also about just the way of thinking of those new technologies, and how for urban planners that have gone to university, 10, 15, 20 years from now, those new capabilities are very complex to embrace. Those drones, may they be on the ground or in the air, have new capabilities, but new limitations as well. Say negative temperatures with batteries, not really the best. So it's just a lot of different things, and maybe that's a message for the audience here when we're trying to do those planning tools. Let's try to embrace that. The capabilities of drone, having a straight line distance between A and B, is kind of something that doesn't exist in the mind of a urban planner. If you're like, oh yeah, you take the street on the right and then you stop at the traffic light, and then, these are obviously very different questions that come into play, and tying it into the model and the topic of today, sustainability, that we've heard under plenty of different forms, trying to think as well, and maybe the models could help in that regard, of what options we are not choosing by choosing that option. There will be a scarcity of batteries. We all know that. The raw materials are missing in the scale of 100 to 1,000. What do we do about it? And if we put a battery for this kind of vehicles, what are the applications that we're not choosing? Yeah. And I think this is the kind of knowledge that will really empower urban planners, urban modelers, and future decision makers to really think of the complexity and this transverse thinking that you were talking about?
In the academia perspective, I think we need to think on global optimum and not local optimum. That's the point.
Absolutely. And maybe Dirk, from the urban air mobility perspective, also the use cases. We learned today that the use case, for example, like we shared, that was for the medical delivery, drones, services, etc., has been recognized as a widely acceptable. But do you have also space on the markets to push maybe for the new use cases, new business models for the services that you can provide? And what would be, for example, Airbus vision of what are the use cases that you would like to work on, but there is something kind of gap on the market that is blocking you to do that?
I think for the Airbus, it's clear the very far vision at the end would have a fully, totally safe, autonomous public person transport vehicle in the air above the cities. But from a personal view, that is quite a distance away. I see in aviation we have a very same experience you just described. We have a gap between planning and operations. And in the projects with Eurocontrol, we also have Horizon 2020, CESAR projects, where we just work exactly to close this gap. And one solution or one tool to do so is simulation. So simulation is the closer with simulation you bring you're aiming to bring the planning very close in the end to the operations, and then you can have a picture what happens on this day, what happens in next minutes, and the whole system can become more and more agile. And it seems exactly the same what you experience on the ground situation than we have in the air. So it's maybe not a typical traffic and transport system. It's maybe technology of today.
Okay, I see that we are going very well with conclusion towards the co-designing together, right? And I see that from the presentation of Simone, actually, from the recommendations for the SUMs and the guidelines was like co-designing all the solutions. And so I see that we are getting a very nicely connection there. So I wanted to ask also maybe from the audience, because we are having like 5 minutes more for this discussion, if you would like to ask our panelists or maybe to give your opinion or your vision on the topics or deployment of the connected cooperative autonomous mobility and urban air mobility? Yeah. No worries. Yeah. Okay, maybe we tackled a lot of stuff. Yeah, very well. So one of the maybe just to maybe wrap up and then to have kind of key message from our discussion. So what I see that apart from having this fixed infrastructure that should deploy and support the deployment on CCAM and also the urban air mobility, I have recognized, and the message from Eman was very clear in the sense that we have to be identifying and knowing very well our stakeholder chain and to find a way to have a dialogue with them and also to have a good business models and to be a bit ambitious, because we needed COVID, to push some solutions. So can we do without this type of dramatic happenings and to test the robustness of our solutions, and agility? So maybe would you like to add maybe some comment on that one to that point?
So I'm really a believer that, this generation, Z generation, probably Y generation, it will make a difference. This generation will make the change which we are all looking for. And I think in a way is that we are seeing also, BOSH is one of the biggest tier 1 suppliers for the automotive sector, and we do see that there will be a model shift, for example, between having an ownership for the vehicles to actually to have more a public ownership, like a club cars and all of this. So we could see that now this shift is happening. We see, for example, that the driving license declining in Europe massively. I mean, it's in Germany, which is a surprise because Germans like their cars, obviously, and we're seeing also in Germany decline is 25% for the new driving license. So there will be a shift, and this shift will come from the inside out. And I think also the whole topic about the climate change as well, it will allow a different attitude towards actually taking a car to drive, or taking a bus, or maybe a drone in the future, or maybe not to drive at all. I mean, all of these home working conditions. You could see in the pattern, I live in London, So Wednesday, Thursday is a nightmare to go into the city because it's the days where people work. But then Monday, Tuesday, Friday, happy days, you can even sleep in the train. Nobody is there. So there is definitely a pattern shift here. And I think this will help then projects like Harmony and others actually to find their ways in these cities, and also we don't have to prove it because I think we all agree that we will have an integrated service system pretty soon, in my opinion.
Yeah, very well. Okay, then that would be like the first takeaway from this panel, but then I would then move to the Jordi, because the concern about the uncertainty, right, in the future and the scenarios. So one of the emphasizes and lessons is that we have to be very careful in designing these future scenarios, yeah, that we want to use as an input and to capture very well this uncertainty in the models when we run the simulations and design of them. But I see as well also, no matter like how much of certainty in the future scenarios we are having, we are still can use the tools that we have today that are ready for the market, yeah, to capture those moments of the future scenarios, and not only of the today, and also to evaluate the future business models. So Jordi, do you have maybe something?
No. The key point always is when we use a model to understand the inputs of the model and the hypothesis.
Yeah.
And get the outputs. The problem is the misunderstanding about the outputs without the prior information that you know, and that's for me the risk. Simplify what will be the impact of this new technology in the future for planning means is risky. So I think it's a pedagogical aspect to spread on the different stakeholders to say, look, we don't have a magic tool.
Yeah.
We need to understand the hypothesis in order to evaluate the outputs. And that's for me the main message, that always I try to, we don't have a magic box.
Yeah, we can be on average close to the truth, but not precisely wrong. Yeah, so
exactly.
Not looking for the precise answer.
Sometimes the decision maker for planning, for example, maybe they are not looking for a specific number, but at least the trends.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least the trends. And I think it's important to know this trend, but to be conscious that this trend it's a multi-factor, have multi-factor aspects that has to be considered and reevaluate. I think Amalia on the panel session, it's necessary to reevaluate every time frame what the decisions that we took yesterday, and that's my message.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then I'll move to Benoît, because with Benoît we had this image and really inspiration for all this panel, how to open it, and it came and opens with the sustainability. And also during this discussion today, you raised the very important message about designing viable use cases. Yeah. So I wanted to, if you can reflect maybe more on that one also as a kind of the key message that we can, what we can do to reach this type of the target for the sustainable mobility.
Right. I mean, I fully agree with what's been said. Also on this side, obviously. But to reflect on a word we heard in the previous panel, we have to be optimistic. I am not so sure that we have to be optimistic about the technology. It gives us incredible capabilities. But the best way to be optimistic is to kind of face the challenges that we have now and have a decent understanding of them. What is ahead of us? How much time do we have to keep doing this trial and error until we really hit the wall and it really hurts, because everybody tells that it's going to be very painful. I mean, all the scientists, not everybody, but everybody. The message is clear. It's going to be a wall that hit. The best way to not be desperate by what's coming next is to kind of inform ourselves about it, kind of embrace the complexity of it, and use enlightenment. What is innovation and what is actual progress? And these are two words for different reasons. In terms of use cases, to answer your questions, to me it's very clear. You've got an archipelago kind of cities, spread out over several islands. Making a small shipment in an emergency situation to save one person, well, it certainly is a reality, and accept that it is a reality in Europe. In China, They are clear about the math. 1.5 billion people minus 1, it's still 1.5 billion people. So some people will look at those questions differently. But I think, you know, those type of first medical use or emergency response, maybe thermal imaging of buildings. How are all the buildings energy efficient? Do we lose a lot of energy in those buildings? That can be done with drones today with the current technologies in a very efficient way. That can be embraced to improve society, to make it a progress.
Oh, very well, thank you, Benoît. And Dirk, we come up now for the collaboration between the planning and operational level, right? And would you like also to give and share the thought on that one as a concluding remark, or having this type of dialogue between the planning and operational level, and as a must, let's say, we can say that one, it's a must to have it if we want to go to the sustainable solutions.
Yeah, well, of course, I think even what I said before, to get this step to the operational level, we need a mindset. I think it has been said several times that the technology is there, and we are not so bad in rule making, especially Europe, I think is quite good, although sometimes difficult, we all know, but we are working on that. And it reminds me on the story from my daughter when she was 8. She jumped into the car and she said, "Dad, when I'm grown up, I don't need a driving license." Oh, yeah. The car I would just tell the car where I need to go and it will go. And I said, "Oh, wow, this is different thinking." And I think if more the younger generations, they get into a cockpit, into a flight, and they look into the cockpit and say, what are the pilots? Are there? Please get them out. I want the machine to fly. Why? I'm looking. Are the pilots there? Okay, fine. I can sleep. So things are changing, and with this change of thinking, these systems will grow faster, and there will be less limits than we have today. And on the other hand, I'm fully with you. Not to overcomplicate when we make the rules and when we think about operations, to have everything in mind at once, taking small steps, iterative approach, small step by step, like medicine first and very urgent deliveries, and then it can grow from there.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have a lot of lessons today, like picked up, but it's nice also to involve them as part of the ERTICO roadmaps, because one, as you know, like an ERTICO ITS Europe is working and it's quite dedicated in developments in terms of the urban mobility, where the urban air mobility is the part of that one, and also the connected cooperative autonomous mobility, as well transport and logistics, and all these pillars are working together, and we are having the roadmap. And I see that some of new insights I'm having from this discussion here that we can definitely deploy and communicate them in our stories and in our kind of co-design and cooperation dialogues that we are holding. Okay, I would like to maybe thank all the panelists for the very nice discussion today, and also the audience for being here for us, and thank you very much.